You're telling me he's back? Megan stared at her brother, her hands trembling around the coffee cup, her breath catching in her throat. For the first time in 15 years, their father, who had abandoned them without a word, had reappeared. This wasn't a casual visit. He wanted back in. He wanted to fix everything. But could it even be fixed? It was a rainy Wednesday evening when it happened. Megan was curled up on the couch, scrolling through her phone, trying to drown out the memories of another long day. The air smelled of damp earth and pine, and the soft hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the otherwise quiet house. She hadn't heard from her father in years. Not a birthday card, not a text. Nothing. It had been 15 years since he walked out of their lives with barely an explanation. The absence was as familiar to her as the scars on her heart. She was only 12 when he left, but it felt like a lifetime ago. She could still remember the harsh slam of the front door, the sound of his footsteps retreating into the night, leaving behind nothing but a trail of confusion and hurt. Her mother had always told her he was gone for work, but Megan had known. She had seen the look on her father's face the day he left, the shame in his eyes, and the way he couldn't meet her gaze. He didn't want to be a father anymore. He didn't want to be a husband. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a doorbell, unexpected, urgent, almost frantic. She hesitated, heart suddenly racing. It was late. Who could possibly be at the door? Her brother, Noah, was the first to get up, his heavy boots thumping across the hardwood floor. He was always the protective one, the one who tried to hold everything together after their father had left. Even though he was 2 years younger than her, he had grown up too fast, forced into a role he never asked for. He opened the door, and Megan saw his posture stiffen. There, standing on the porch, was their father. The man who had abandoned them. The man who had chosen a life without them. He was older now, grayer, but still wearing that same hesitant, apologetic look. "Dad." Noah's voice cracked, as if the word itself felt foreign in his mouth. Megan's heart skipped a beat. She couldn't move. She had been ready for this moment, in a way, but now that it was happening, now that he was standing there, she wasn't sure if she was ready to face the ghost of her past. "I know this is unexpected," their father said, his voice small but steady. "But I need to talk. Please." Megan felt a rush of emotion, anger, disbelief, fear. She had imagined this moment 100 times over the years. What would she say to him if he ever came back? What would she do if he stood at her door asking for forgiveness, asking to be part of her life again? Her fists clenched as she walked toward the door, Noah still standing motionless in the threshold. "Why are you here?" she demanded, her voice sharp, cutting through the tension. "After everything you've done, why now? Why come back after all these years?" Her father shifted uncomfortably, his eyes downcast. I've made a lot of mistakes. I know I can never undo what I did, but I need to try. I've thought about you both every day. Every day." Megan interrupted, her voice rising. "You weren't there. You didn't think about us when we needed you. When Mom was sick, when Noah got in trouble at school, when I graduated, where were you?" Her father flinched at the accusation, and for a brief moment, his face crumbled. She could see the guilt etched deep into his features, but it wasn't enough. He hadn't just missed milestones, he had missed the day-to-day struggles. He had missed the pain of them having to raise themselves, to become adults without the guidance of the man who should have been their protector. "I was selfish," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I thought it would be easier for you without me. I thought you'd be better off without the mess I created." "Better off?" Noah finally spoke, his voice low and dangerous. "You think we were better off? We grew up wondering why you left, wondering if we weren't good enough. You think we were better off without a dad? You weren't there when we needed you. And now you expect us to just forget all that?" Megan felt Noah's pain. It was the same anger she had buried deep inside herself for years. It was the same fear that haunted her every time she saw a father with his children, every time a friend shared a story about their dad picking them up from school or teaching them how to drive. She had always been afraid that letting their father back in would mean exposing herself to more hurt. Their father's eyes welled up with tears. "I don't know how to fix what I broke, but I want to try. I know I can't erase the past, but I'm asking for a chance. Just a chance." Megan stood frozen, staring at him. Every fiber of her being screamed to slam the door in his face, to cut him out for good and never look back. But a small part of her, the part she had tried to bury for years, wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that the man standing in front of her wasn't the same man who had abandoned them. Noah looked at her, his jaw tight. "What do we do now?" The days following their father's return were tense, like an old wound that had been reopened. Megan couldn't stop thinking about the night he had shown up at their door. His apology, his tears, they lingered in her mind, gnawing at her. She had always imagined that if he ever came back, she would have everything figured out. She would know exactly what to say. But now that he was here, she was consumed by confusion and anger. Was she supposed to just forgive him? Was she supposed to welcome him back into her life, as though nothing had happened? For the first few days, he kept his distance. He called, he texted, trying to find ways to make amends. He dropped off groceries at the house, sent small notes with apologies scribbled across them, hoping they would soften their hearts. But each gesture felt more like an intrusion. Every time Megan saw his name on her phone, her stomach twisted into knots. How could he just waltz back into their lives and expect everything to be fine? Noah, on the other hand, was stone cold. He didn't respond to any of their father's attempts to reconnect, keeping to himself, retreating into his work. Megan noticed that he was more distant than usual, even to her. He'd shut down, his emotions buried deep, and his anger was only growing. She could see it in his eyes. He was struggling with the same questions she was, but unlike her, he didn't want answers. He didn't want to give their father another chance. One evening, after another failed attempt at small talk over dinner, Megan finally confronted him. The table was quiet except for the clink of silverware against plates, and the air felt suffocating. Their father was trying again, his voice gentle but persistent. "I know it's hard to understand, but I'm here now," he said, his eyes searching both of theirs, hoping for some sign of acceptance. "I'm trying, Megan. I know I messed up, but I want to make things right." Megan's grip tightened around her fork. She wanted to scream, wanted to say every hurtful thing she had kept bottled up for years. Instead, she forced herself to remain calm, though her voice cracked as she spoke. "You think you can just waltz back and like nothing happened? You don't get to come back after all this time and act like we should just forgive you because you're sorry now. You don't get to have a second chance at being our dad." Her words stung, but they weren't the ones she wanted to say. She wanted to tell him how much he had hurt them, how every birthday had felt empty, how every school event had been overshadowed by the constant ache of his absence. She wanted to scream at him for not being there when their mother had struggled, when Noah had spiraled into rebellion, when she had cried herself to sleep at night wondering what she had done wrong. But instead, she looked away, trying to hold herself together. Noah, who had remained silent up until this point, slammed his fist on the table. The noise echoed in the quiet room, the tension palpable. "Do you even get it?" he asked, his voice rising. "You can't just walk back in after 15 years like you've been the good guy all along. We've had to live without you, without a father, without any explanation. We had to become adults on our own, because you didn't have the guts to stick around." Their father recoiled, the words hitting him harder than he expected. He had been prepared for anger, but not the raw, unfiltered pain that came with it. "I'm sorry, Noah," he said softly, his voice shaking. "I wasn't strong enough then, but I'm stronger now. And I want to be here for you, for both of you. I know I can't make up for lost time, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this right." But Noah shook his head, his eyes cold. "I don't want your apologies. I want the dad I never got to have. I don't know who you are anymore, and frankly, I don't want to know." Megan watched as her father flinched, the hurt clear on his face. She had never seen him look so vulnerable, so defeated. But that didn't change the fact that he had left them. That didn't change the years of trauma they had suffered without him. For the rest of the evening, there was nothing but silence. The air felt thick with unresolved emotions. No one spoke. Their father retreated to the couch, pulling out a worn photo album from the drawer. Megan couldn't help but look over, and when she did, she saw the pictures. Pictures of a time when their family had been whole, when they had smiled together, when she had been Daddy's little girl. Her chest tightened. She wanted to see that man again. She wanted to believe that the person in those photos could somehow be the same one sitting in front of her, asking for another chance. Noah left the house early the next morning without a word, and Megan found herself alone with their father again. The house felt too quiet, too empty. Her father walked over to her, holding out the photo album. "I know it's hard," he said, his voice breaking. "I know I don't deserve anything from you. But please, just let me show you how much I want to try. We can't fix everything in one day, but we can start somewhere." Megan opened the album, her fingers trembling as she ran over the pages, pausing at a photo of her as a young girl, smiling up at the camera, sitting in their father's lap. For a moment, she could almost forget the hurt, almost remember the man who had once been her hero. But as soon as the memory came, it left. The reality of who he had become loomed over them like a shadow, and Megan realized the hardest part wasn't the past. It was deciding whether to let this stranger back in. Days turned into weeks, and Megan and Noah found themselves caught in a whirlwind of emotions they weren't sure how to process. Their father's attempts to make amends were constant. Too constant, it seemed. The more he tried, the more Megan felt suffocated, like a weight was pushing down on her chest. Noah remained distant, more closed off than ever, retreating into his work or locking himself away in his room, avoiding any confrontation. Megan, on the other hand, couldn't escape. Every time she looked at her father, she saw the man who had abandoned them. She saw his face as he walked out the door all those years ago, leaving behind nothing but broken promises and unanswered questions. She wanted to be angry, to scream at him for everything he had stolen from her, from them. But in the quiet moments, when the house was still, she couldn't deny the small flicker of hope that lingered. Could they really start over? Could they rebuild the trust that had been shattered? One evening, after another strange dinner, their father invited them to sit with him in the living room. His face was weary, his eyes filled with the same quiet desperation that had been present since his return. He wasn't giving up, not without a fight, but Megan could see it in his posture. He was starting to lose faith that they would ever accept him again. "I'm not asking you to forget," he said softly, his hands shaking slightly as he spoke. "I know I can't undo the damage, but I've been thinking about something, about what I missed. And I know I failed you both. But you're not the only ones who have been hurting all these years." Megan's eyes narrowed, skepticism creeping in. "What do you mean, we're not the only ones?" she asked, her voice edged with disbelief. Noah, who had been staring at the floor, suddenly looked up. "What? You're going to tell us that you've been suffering too? That we should feel bad for you?" Her father flinched, but he didn't back down. "No, I'm not asking you to feel bad for me," he said quietly. "I've been living with this guilt every day. I'm not proud of what I did, and I'm not trying to excuse it. But when I left, when I chose to leave, I thought it would make things easier for all of us. I didn't know how to be a father. I was scared. And I thought if I stayed, I'd only mess things up more." Megan's breath caught in her throat, and she turned to Noah, searching for some sign that he was ready to hear their father out. But Noah's jaw was tight, his anger still raw. "You didn't leave because you were scared," he snapped, his voice rising. "You left because you were selfish. You thought you'd have a better life without us. You didn't even stop to think about what it would do to us." Megan could feel her chest tighten. She wanted to say something, wanted to yell at their father for all the years they had been robbed of, but something in his eyes made her pause. He wasn't giving excuses. He was admitting his failure, his weakness. "I know I was selfish," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I thought running away would make it easier for me, that I could start over, that you two would be better off without me dragging you down. But I was wrong. I see that now." Megan felt the walls she had built around her begin to crack. But the anger, the anger still burned inside her. She couldn't just forgive him. She couldn't just forget the years they had spent in silence, the years of wondering why he had left, why he had abandoned them. But as much as she wanted to hate him, part of her knew that she was starting to understand. She was starting to see him as a man who was broken, who was just as much a victim of his own fears and mistakes as they were. But could she forgive him? Could Noah? "I don't know if I can do this," Megan said, her voice shaking. "I don't know if I can just let everything go and pretend like it's fine. I don't know if I can trust you again." Noah looked up at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of confusion and anger. "We don't have to pretend it's fine. We don't have to pretend that nothing happened. We've been living without him for years, Megan. I'm not ready to just accept him back like it's nothing." Their father's face crumpled, as though her words physically struck him. "I'm not asking you to pretend," he said softly. "I'm not asking you to forget. I'm just asking for a chance to be a part of your lives again. That's all." Megan stood up, pacing the room. A chance to what? Mess it up again? To walk away when things get hard. She stopped in front of the window, staring out into the darkness. "You want a chance, but we don't know who you are anymore. You're a stranger to us." Her father looked at her, and for the first time, he didn't try to defend himself. He didn't try to explain away his mistakes. He simply nodded, acknowledging the truth in her words. "I understand. I do." It was in that moment that Megan realized the magnitude of what had been lost. This wasn't just about forgiveness. This was about rebuilding an entire life that had been torn apart. The road ahead would be long, and it would be painful. She couldn't make any promises, not to her father, not to herself, but the idea of moving forward, even slowly, started to feel like a possibility. A slim one, but a possibility. Noah stood up abruptly and walked toward the door. "I need space," he muttered, his voice thick with emotion. "I can't do this right now." He was gone before anyone could say anything more, leaving Megan alone with their father. The silence that followed was suffocating. She sat down on the couch, her mind racing. "Maybe," she said quietly, not looking at her father. "Maybe I can try. But it's going to take time. A lot of time. And I don't know if I can let you in again." Their father sat down next to her, his face filled with the same quiet desperation. "I'm willing to wait," he said, his voice hoarse. "I'll wait as long as it takes." The tension between them hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. Megan didn't know what would come next, didn't know if she would ever fully forgive him, didn't know if Noah would ever come around. But she realized at that moment that the possibility of healing, no matter how small, was a step forward. It wasn't a fix, but it was a start. Weeks passed, and the family started to find some balance. Megan and Noah still didn't trust their father fully, but they could see that he was different, genuine in his desire to be part of their lives. Their mother, who had quietly supported them all these years, finally spoke up one evening. "You both need to decide if you can forgive him. I won't pressure you," she said, her voice tinged with sadness, "but I think we all deserve some peace." It wasn't an instant fix. There were still moments of anger, moments when the past felt too heavy. But for the first time, they were all sitting together at the dinner table as a family again. There was no magical resolution, no fairy tale ending. But they were learning to move forward, slowly, and in their own way. Megan looked at her father and nodded, a small, reluctant smile forming. "This doesn't mean everything is okay," she said quietly, "but maybe, just maybe, it's a start." What do you think? Can a family truly heal after years of abandonment? Or are some wounds just too deep to repair? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new family drama. Thanks for watching.